All right, Inner Circle members, welcome to another monthly Jazz Mastermind here in the Inner Circle. In fact, it's the last monthly Jazz Mastermind, last Q&A session of 2021. So I'm so excited to be here with all you guys. A big happy new year to everybody. Much joy and love going into this next year. Hope that everybody is enjoying time with friends and family during the holiday season. So happy holidays to everybody. For those of you who are new to the Inner Circle, and I know that we do have a lot of new members who have been coming through the last month or so. So just want to give a little review of what is the Monthly Jazz Mastermind. So the Monthly Jazz Mastermind is your opportunity once a month to ask me any jazz or music related questions that you would like answered. And if you're watching the Oh, am I still here? I think we lost connection for a second, but hopefully we're back. Okay. Well, anyways, I'm here to help answer any questions that you may have. So before we do that, of course, we go into some of the questions. Let me go ahead and say hello to some of the folks here in the chat. We got Allah is here. Allah, welcome. Always great to have you. Tom is here from Mississippi. Welcome, Tom. We have Cliff from the Virgin Islands. David, always nice to see you. William from Massachusetts. Always great to have you, William. Appreciate you. Andre is here, of course. Eric is here from the Netherlands. Bruce is here. Phil is here. Welcome, Phil. Always great to have you, Phil. Kevin MCC from New Mexico. Great to have you, Kevin. Jack is here. Harold from Under is here. Mario is here from Australia as well. We got a lot of Australians here this morning. It must be early for you guys. Lewis is here. Lewis, man, you've been here since the beginning. Always great to have you, Lewis. Richard is here. John Weiss from Boston. First time joining the live stream. Just joined this week. So awesome to have you, Josh. Really appreciate you being here, and welcome to Inner Circle, my friend. That's going to be a fun journey. Mr. Jawin is here. Great to have you. Kai says hello from New Zealand. Hello. Let's see. Who else do we have? Don't want to miss anybody. Tim, did I say hi to you already? Always nice to see you, Tim. Great to have you. Sergio, great to have you here as well. Fritz, always a pleasure. Our friend from Austria. Francis from North Carolina. Wes from Toronto. Roberta is here. Another New Mexican here. Awesome. And let's see. Anyone else before we jump into some questions? Elliot is here. Bob from Atlanta. Great to have you guys. Okay, awesome. So, as is per tradition, at the very end of the stream, I'll be announcing our next monthly, our next Jazz Standards Club study, our first one for 2022. So, if you're someone who's engaged in the Jazz Standards Club studies, then I'll announce that at the end what the new one is. We're having a lot of fun with Yardbird Suite right now. But the next one is also another personal favorite of mine. So we'll jump into that. Let's jump right into the questions, though. And feel free, if you're in the live chat right now, to go ahead and start asking your questions. And we'll get to them as we keep going over the next hour or so. Okay, so this first question comes from Sean. And Sean is asking, when playing a chord with an altered note, so sharp 11, flat 9, or 13, should the altered note be on top, or can it be buried in an inversion? So the answer is yes, it can be buried in an inversion. It does not have to be when you're playing a voicing. I'm not sure, Sean, if you play piano or guitar. When you're playing a voicing, then absolutely you don't have to have that or that altered. Now, sometimes you might choose to do it for melodic purposes or to bring that note out, particularly in the higher register of the chord, but you absolutely do not need to. Okay. So you can play that anywhere you want inside of the chord. Okay. Next question. This one comes from Lewis. Lewis, always great to have your questions. Root first and second inversion all use the same notes, but why do they sound different? Okay. That's a good question, right? So this is a G major seventh, right? But also that's a G major seventh. Sounds different. That's a G major seventh, right? So, so yeah, uh, we have these different inversions, and right, an inversion is simply just taking that bottom note, the root, and flipping it up to the top, and now you have the third on the bottom, right? Roots on the bottom, then the thirds on the bottom, the fifths on the bottom, so on and so forth, right? So why does it sound different? It sounds different because to your ear, it's giving it a different context or perspective. Oftentimes our ears are learning to listen to what the low note is, what the bass note is. When you throw in a different bass note, it kind of just shifts your perspective a bit. So it's all the same chord. There's nothing changing about the chord. The notes are exactly the same, but you're adding different color. And that's why inversions are important. If you're a chordal instrument, a guitar, piano, it's important to make sure you know your inversions, know them in all 12 keys, all of your different kinds of seventh chords, because it's really going to add a different color and possibility, and also voice leading opportunity. We don't necessarily want to be always playing root position chord voicings for everything. So it sounds different because we're adding a different bass note in there, and we're swapping out the chord from that usual structure that we're used to listening to, right? Especially when we're practicing it. And Lewis, you're a trumpet player, so you might be playing root, third, fifth, seventh. Well, try playing on the trumpet the arpeggios, third, fifth, seventh, and then root, right? Seeing what that feels like. Okay. So yeah, just different sounds, and we've got to make sure that we know how to play those. Let's go to the next question. This is a good question from Richard. Richard asks, when you come across a bar in a jazz standard that has two chords, for example, a F minor seven and a B flat seven, is there one chord that could take precedent over the other? Like, can I just stick to the B flat seven chord for the bar? I'm using Yardbird Suite as an example here because of the many instances of two chords within the bar. Yeah. So what Richard is asking here, I'm going to tilt it down a little bit more towards my guitar for guitar players who want to see my hands, because I know sometimes that's a complaint. So what Richard's asking is, a lot of times when we have these two beats per chord situation, how do we improvise over that? It's going by so fast. In the case of Yardbird Suite, we have the one chord and then the F minor seven and the B flat seven. So the quick answer to your question, Richard, is the five chord, the dominant seventh chord, always can take precedent over the two chord, right? But it's important, if we look at our chords analysis of Yardbird Suite, right? If we look at our chords analysis of Yardbird Suite, we realize that we have this 2-5. This B flat seven is what's called a backdoor dominant, okay? Backdoor dominant, which means it's a tension chord that's going into our one chord. It's a tension chord. It's a substitution, right? So instead of the five chord, which would be, G7, right? We have this B flat seven. Now that works because there are some shared tones between this B flat seven chord and an altered G7 chord, right? So really this B flat seven is the tension and release chord functioning in this harmony. That's why it's important to understand your harmony. So what you can do is you can create a line that ignores the F minor seven if you want, and just focuses on that 5-1 relationship. So right, so that focused just on hitting a B flat seven. So it just was like playing a one chord to a B flat, that backdoor dominant, back to the C. Right? Ignoring the F minor seven completely. That's totally okay. So if you were to prioritize one or the other, always prioritize the five chord, or prioritize that dominant seventh chord that's resolving. It's that tension chord. So focus on the tension chord and the resolution. That being said, I don't think that you should exclusively ignore when you have a two chord in front of a five. You can choose to do a line like that, right? But also, let's try to play that exact same line that I just played, but purposefully hit that F minor seven, right? 2 bars that, sorry, 2 bars, I'm saying 2 bars, 2 beats per measure chord system there. So here's our C major 7. Let's go. Okay, you see how I reworked that? So I went, okay, that's an arpeggio up the F minor 7. Still resolving to the third of that C major 7, but, or let's try this way. Right, so I'm going up the F minor arpeggio, but still hitting the arpeggio of that B flat 7, and then resolving to the third of the C major 7. So here's the takeaway that I want you, Richard, to take away, and everybody else who's listening here, is what I like to do in these situations is I like to sit down and do what I just did, but for a lot longer. I like to compose out my thoughts, try to think to myself, okay, that's one way. Right, I actually like that line I played. Let's see. What'd I play? That's a nice, like, if I'm just targeting 7, I could come up with a ton of different ways to do that. And then I could come up with a ton of different ways to target that F minor 7 and the B flat 7 at once, right? Really get that bebop going in there. So compose, compose, compose. I mean, I know you guys have heard me say this a lot if you've been in the inner circle for a while. And if you're new to the inner circle, you're going to hear me talk about it a lot. Composing, 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 right? Richard says, yes, that's what I've been doing for the last week or so. Awesome, Richard. That is exactly what I like to hear. That is perfect. That is, that's the way to go. Cool. So hopefully that helps, Richard. Let's see if there's our first question in the chat that we can go ahead and answer here. Okay, Cliff has a question here. A travel-related question. How do members travel with their instrument on planes, especially guitar players? Do you check them as baggage, or do you try to carry them on board? I'm sure that others might have some ideas in the chat of what they've done in the past. I'll tell you, like I always bring a hard case if obviously. I don't ever bring a soft case if I'm going to travel with my instrument, because that's just way, 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 way too risky for me. If they absolutely will not let it on the plane, I'll say in the past, I've always put up a pretty big fight to make sure that it gets on the plane. So I'll always put up a very, very big fight. In fact, I've never actually let my guitar go under, I don't think. Oh no, there was one time I did. I know that some people, a lot of the really like touring guitar players, they'll buy like really intense cases that aren't very nice for actually traveling around, but they work well for if you have to put them under the plane. They can be thrown, they can be chucked. They're just very, very bulky, expensive cases that protect. So I don't know. I always find it very awkward to travel with my instrument because it usually there's usually some conflict during my trip between the folks at the gate and me trying to get my guitar on board. So yeah, I would love to hear. I wonder what other people's thoughts are as well on that. Let's see. Question in the chat. First question in the chat. Okay. Wow, we have someone called Learn Jazz, which is Bob Ellis. Bob, are you stealing our name? Best wishes for the new year. I have a question about tuning of instruments. What is the significance of concert C tuning or B flat instruments? So I'm not sure exactly the entire context of the question, Bob, but if you have a C instrument like the guitar, right? And let's just say we're in key of concert E flat, okay, concert E flat, right? If I were to try to transpose that for a B flat instrument, now we're in concert F. For you, we're in a concert F. Sounds the same though. It sounds like you're still playing in concert E flat, but if you're playing a B flat instrument like a saxophone, for you, you're playing an F note where you would be seeing a concert part would say E flat. It still sounds like the same note though. As far as E flat, I like to think about transposing E flat, going a minor third down from concert C, or if you're at E flat, going a minor third up, right? So if I'm playing an E flat note, I would be playing a C if I was a concert E flat instrument. Okay. So a minor third down is the way I think of it from concert. Or if you're playing a C note, it means you're actually playing a concert E flat. Okay. So that's kind of how that works. Um, Someone much smarter than me that knows instruments more probably knows why that is. I never personally could understand that. Why is it that, the naming conventions are different and different notes, different things. I don't know. Maybe somebody in the chat actually knows the answer to that. I'd be interested. I really don't know the answer to that, but hopefully that. All right, and I see my internet's a little bit wonky today, so if I cut in and out on you guys, I do apologize, but hopefully it's not going to cause us too much issues here. And I'll have to look at that after the stream to see what's going on. Okay. Okay, this question comes from John, and he says, as we transcribe solos by ear, should we write them out as we go or rely totally on memory? Um, okay, so there's always the way I answer this question is always a few different ways, John. So the first thing I would say is the reason that you would write out or transcribe a solo for me is if you are trying to document it somewhere and put it away somewhere for a long time and then come back and look at it or analyze it again. Okay. That's why that would be the reason I would transcribe a solo. I've barely ever actually transcribed a solo. Very few times I've actually done that. And the reason that is because as far as improvising and learning jazz language, 100% every single time, forget about writing it down if your goal is just to write it down and then read it, because that's actually defeating like I would say 50%, if not 75% of the purpose of learning a solo by ear. Okay. The idea, even if you learned a solo not by ear and you learned it from reading a piece of like an etude, like the etudes in the Jazz Standards Club, for example, you said, I don't want to learn it by ear. I'm going to read it. If you don't memorize it, then you're not really internalizing that jazz language. And that's where people start getting a little bit frustrated. They're like, well, I've learned all these solos, I've learned all of this stuff. I still am able to play jazz solos the way I want to. Well, one aspect of that is because you aren't actually getting away from the page. You're stuck to the page. Reading is a completely different than internalizing musical information. You're reading it's like you're reading something off of a page. I can read 1,000 books, but if I don't actually commit or take action on any of those specific concepts in those books, almost meaningless that I read the book, right? So unless I memorize something or extract from it something that I want to remember, it's really, you're losing a lot of the reason of doing it. So I would very highly suggest memorizing solos by ear. So the secondary would be transcribing and writing it down if you find that helpful, if you want to keep it around for later. If you want to analyze it and like theoretically, totally okay to do that. But I would way rather you learn 8 bars of an etude or a solo and memorize that. I would rather you do that than, you know, transcribe and write down an entire solo, but not actually memorize any part of it personally, because the benefit is not as much there for me if you're not memorizing it. Okay. Does that make sense? And again, another thing I like to clarify too is when I say memorizing, it does. Sorry, cutting out with the internet again. So hopefully you guys are still tracking with me. Let me know if every okay with the stream right now in the chat. break or anything like that. I should know. No one said anything yet, so I'll assume that I'm okay. But I do know my internet's a little shaky now. So yes, you don't have to memorize forever. Even just short term is well worth it. Okay. So hopefully that helps, John. Let me go to another question that was asked ahead of time. All right, another question from Richard. Would you explain and maybe illustrate the term turnaround? Pick any tune to illustrate. Yeah, I can absolutely do that. So, well, let's use again. I'll aim down my camera a bit for the guitar players who might be interested here. Let's use the example of my shining hour. So the last four bars is a 2-5-1, right? Okay, so we're trying to improvise over the tune. So the most basic turnaround you could do is just a 5 chord going back to the 1, right? Because the first chord of my shining hour. Oh, I'm talking about the wrong tune. Yardbird Suite. We're talking about Yardbird Suite. So we've been studying Yardbird Suite. So Yardbird Suite, right? It ends on C major. So the most basic turnaround would be just the 5 chord, right? Okay. Now, if we want to add another chord in front of that turnaround, we would just do a 2-5 in that last bar, and now we're back again. So a 2-5 is fine. We could do a 1-6-2-5 because the turnaround, all a turnaround is doing is turning around back to the top. So we're just adding more tension and resolution. So we could also do a 3-6-2-5-1, right? Does that make sense? So a turnaround is any chord progression. It could be a 1-4-3-6-2-5-1. A turnaround can really be any series of chords you want to get back to the 1 chord. It always is going to end with the 5 chord. That's the basics. Always going to end with the 5 chord. We could go and then go tritone sub, okay, resolving to the 1 chord at the top of the form again. So that's just like the basics of what a turnaround is. A turnaround is just trying to figure out a way harmonically to get back to the top of a song form or to another section. Like sometimes, like the first A, if you have an AABA song form, the first A, you're going to have a turnaround that brings you back to the top of that second A, right? It could be a 2-5, it could be a 5. So yes. Okay. Let's go to another question asked ahead of time. Oh, Cliff, you already asked that question ahead of time. Okay. Okay. And this one is from Mario or Mario. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing it correctly. Um, in the instrument accelerator course, specifically guitar, when learning the major scale shapes early on, at what stage should you be actually learning the actual note names? It's the big question about learning note names on the fretboard. Okay, so this is a good question for like guitar players and bass players, I would say. So I think immediately you should be worrying about what the note names are. Okay, so right away, start figuring out what the note names are when you're working through these courses. It ultimately for improvisation, you don't have to be thinking about what the note names are, right? But when it comes to truly knowing your fretboard, you want to be thinking about what the note names are every single time. So there's a couple layers to that question, Mario. On one hand, I want you to be able to look at any part of this fretboard, and if I point here, this is a G. If I pointed here, you would know this is a G, right? You want to be able to get to that point through however is effective for you, whether it's working through scales, whether it's thinking about octaves, whether it's thinking about chord voicings. Ultimately, you should be working on that right away. But then there's this other side of it too, where if you're working on playing scales on a single string, honestly, you just want to be following your ear mostly. You don't want to be thinking about the note names all the time. You want to be following your ear so you can just hear what the sound of a major scale is, what a melodic minor scale sounds like. So there's both an ear side to understanding your fretboard and there's a logical analytical side. But I would definitely say right away, make sure you're working on getting to know what the actual note names are. Okay. Um, all right, let's go for some questions in the chat here. Okay, didn't want to miss any. Eric, good question. I found the approach tone for Yardbird Suite very challenging. Do you have any suggestions on how to work with this map for beginner, intermediate, and advanced itinerary? Yeah. So, Eric, what I would just say is if you find it challenging, I'm wondering why you find them challenging. Do you find them challenging because it's difficult to play them, or is it difficult to understand them? So, I would probably want to follow up on that question for you. So maybe let me know in the chat why you find it challenging. That's just helpful for me to know to answer the question a little bit better. But the other thing that I would say is when we're talking about beginner, intermediate, advanced, a lot of times I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to do all of something. What if you just did the first 8 bars of that approach tone map and you really committed to figuring it out and learning it? Could you do it then, Eric? That's my question. I have the same thing when people say, "Oh wow, the etude this month was a little bit challenging for me." Well, for me, it's a good month's work if you just got like 8 bars of that etude. So I would say the same for the approach tone map. If you're finding it difficult, then what you want to do is really just do a little bit of it. Do a little bit of it and spend a lot of time on it. So I can't remember, I couldn't name to you exactly everything that's happening in the beginner, intermediate, and advanced itineraries, but the sections where I'm asking you to do some mapping, cut it in half, right? If it's too much, and just really focus on less information. So we don't need to do all, like, I would way rather people get a little bit of information really well than a lot of information not that well, right? So a challenge is a good thing, in my opinion, when we're talking about music. If we're being challenged, it means that we're actually growing. So that's a good thing, Eric. So, and I can tell you recognize that as well. But I would just say do less of it. Now, if there's something specific about them that's challenging that you need to work on, that's also something to find out and to consider that we can maybe get an answer to. So let me see if you wrote anything in the chat actually. Difficult to play on the guitar. I understand the concept. Got you. So what I say, Eric, is spend a lot of time working on just the first 8 bars and really figuring out what are the best fingerings for you. Actually, Eric, this could be a huge moment for you. If you can figure out great fingerings of how to start resolving to some of these chord tones using approach tones, and you find something comfortable for you that makes sense with the way you visualize your instrument, this could be huge. And just 8 bars could be amazing. So really spend a lot of time and just imagine like what are the ideal ways I can play this exercise on my instrument, right? You don't need tabs. Tabs is people always say like, "Oh, I wish I had tabs." No, you don't want tabs because tabs is the way one person would play it on their instrument, on their guitar. What you want is to figure out how to play it best on your instrument. So that's what I would challenge you to do, Eric, is just simplify. Let me know if that resonates with you. It's an answer. It's an answer to a lot of the things when people say it's challenging. It's just do less of it, and then maybe next time you could do more of it, basically. So hopefully that helps a little bit there. Um, let's do another question asked ahead of time. Or transcribing questions. Love the transcribing questions. All right. This one is from John Watt. If I'm transcribing, how important is it that I get every note absolutely correct to get a good idea of what the soloist is trying to say and have it fit the form, but perhaps every note exactly perfect? Should I labor on every note or get the general idea of the phrase and have it fit the harmony as best I can? Then hope that makes sense. That's a great question, John. Now, It's interesting. My personal opinion is when we're learning how to play someone else's solo, what I want to do is I want to figure out exactly the way they played it, exactly the way they played it, so that I can go later and play it not at all how they played it, but pull away the important lessons since came from me laboring over practicing getting every single note and single rhythm matched exactly with the recording. So for me, I think it is a good idea. I don't want to say to you that it is 100% like not well, if you don't do it perfect like exactly, then it's not worth you doing it. Like I'm not going to say that. But what I will say is for me personally, I would recommend it. I would recommend you do slow it down if you have to, like get on Amazing Slowdowner or any slowdowner that you may use. Slow down that solo so that you can get every single note and every single rhythm. Because the thing is, we're trying to really get the nuances of what someone's playing. And by doing this labor, right, this practicing and being intentional and being exact, we're really giving ourselves the opportunity to internalize something deeply, right? And again, the idea of when we learn a solo or a part of a solo or even a lick, the idea isn't necessarily that we're going to play it verbatim when we're improvising. That's not the idea. In fact, the idea is really just to take an essence of what they're doing and then turn it into something of your own. So in that sense, what you're suggesting could be okay, right? Because you're just grabbing the essence of something. But for me, I'd rather first just really understand what they did exactly, and then I can deconstruct it for myself. But if we're missing some of those nuances, then maybe we're not quite getting all the juice that we can get out of it. That's my personal opinion. Again, I don't want to say that if you don't do it my way, that it's not worth it. It's still going to be totally worth it if you just get the essence of the solo. But I like to be thorough. I just like to get it really the right way. I like to really make sure I'm getting inside of how they're playing it so then I can take what I want from it personally. So I would encourage you to do that, is what I would say. I wouldn't say you have to. I would just say I'd encourage you to do that. And again, if the issue is, well, I just don't have enough time to do that, learn less, like learn 8 bars, right? That's going to be the big theme of today's talk. Learn just 8 bars of that solo. Don't learn the whole solo. Don't learn the whole chorus of the solo. Like learn just 8 bars and get it exact, right? Milk everything you can out of those 8 bars. Get it exactly the like. So don't do more if that's the problem. Like if it's you don't have enough time, do less, right? Less is more, right? You've heard that before. So that's what I would say. Um, let's see. I want to see if there's anything else you said. Should I labor every note, get the general affairs, have it fit the when best move on? Yeah, just do less than more and get it exact, and then move on. That's. I think that's my best answer. Um, okay, let me go to a question in the chat. Um, lots of questions in the chat. Okay. Got you. You also asked it here in the chat. Um, Tim says, I don't think I'd consider taking vibes on a plane. That would be tricky, Tim. That that'd be interesting. See if that fits in the overhead rack. Ted saying, with regard to chord inversions, I'll play them over the chord progression of the tune we are doing. Of course, I also would shed the other material. Okay. Can't remember what that was in context of, Ted. Fritz is asking, can you shortly explain how to play with a metronome on beats 2 and 4? Yeah. So, I mean, I don't have a metronome on with my computer right now to show you, but let's just say, right, that's beats 2 and 4. So, really, the idea of putting it on beats 2 and 4, especially with jazz, is like technically the beats that you really want to emphasize in jazz is 2 and 4. If we're swinging, that is, right? And it doesn't really matter. You could do it on 1 and 3 too. But what you're doing is you're training yourself to feel the strong beats 1 and 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. What I would do actually is before I even started playing anything, Fritz, if I wasn't used to playing beats 2 and 4, is um, I would just turn on a metronome and just do some counting or tapping my foot on the strong beats. Not that I suggest tapping your foot while you play. That could be a little throw you off actually, but just for practicing before play, practice feeling those strong beats or swaying your body on beats 1 and 3 because we feel the time in our body. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to feel the time in our body. And then I would just go from there. I would just start playing scales, right? Or something simple that you don't have to even think about, right? Before we go to improvisation. But eventually, what you can do is Fritz. Actually, my challenge for you, Fritz, because you've been a member for a long time. So I always like giving extra challenges to the members who've been sticking around for a while. My challenge for you, Fritz, is for the next for all of January, metronome only do it on beats 2 and 4. Okay, so no 1, 2, 3, 4, no 1 and 3, just 2 and 4. And yeah, again, if you feel completely uncomfortable, just start with not playing anything, then go to scales, then go to basic exercises, chord tone maps, if you will, and then move to playing melodies, right? And then move to improvising a little bit. So 2 and 4, and you'll start feeling it, right? If you have any specific questions about that, Fritz, because that's your question is a little bit general, but if you have any more specific questions about playing with the metronome on beats 2 and 4, I can probably address it a little bit clearer than that. Okay, Albert is asking, trying to memorize a Roman numeral chord sequence for Blackberry minor. For the last 4 bars of the bridge, I have B minor 7, flat 5, E7, A minor 7, G minor 7, C7. I don't know that song, Albert, Blackberry Winter, in F minor. But what I will say is so you got like a 2, 5 to A minor, which is interesting. Which is like the 3 chord in the major series. So I don't know. And then you have G minor 7, C7. I'm assuming it resolves to an F minor 7. I don't know that song, Blackberry Winter. I'm not sure if you have a specific question about it. I don't personally know that one. So maybe that was in context to something else I'm not understanding. Let me go to, we have one more question that was asked ahead of time. And then we'll answer any questions left in the chat. How you guys doing? Everybody doing okay? Okay. This is from, I don't want to mess up your name. Kigray, I'm so sorry if I get your name incorrect, but can you please discuss and explain how dominant 7 flat 9 chords are used and when we can expect to find them? So a dominant 7 flat 9 chord can be used really anywhere. It could be, honestly, it can be used anytime you want to resolve to a minor 7th chord or a major 7th chord or even a dominant 7th chord. So anytime, right, we talk about basic harmony. Let's say we're in the key of C major. Give a guitar view for our guitar players here. So, we have right? And if we have a 2, 5, that's and a 1, anytime we see a chord, we can move it. Added. That's an altered, right? Right? So anytime you see any single dominant 7th chord, you can add a flat 9 to it. You can add a flat 13 to it. You could add a sharp 9 to it. You could add a sharp 11. The sharp 11 isn't as much of a tension and release note, but it still is a good color note you could use. So you can add all these alterations, extensions, including the flat nine. It adds more tension and makes you feel like it makes it feel like it's going to have more tension building up to your resolution. And so jazz musicians all the time, whether they're improvising or playing bass lines or playing chord progressions, chords, are in fact utilizing these all the time in their lines, that extra tension. So you can use that flat nine anywhere you want. So in fact, I make that your challenge this week is anytime you see a dominant seventh chord and it's resolving to another chord, which usually dominant seventh chord is, um, in most cases, you can play the flat nine. Not in all cases, but in most cases, you can play the flat nine. And so challenge or improvising or playing chords or bass lines or whatever, challenge yourself to outline that flat nine as much as possible so you're getting that sound in your ear and figuring out and learning new ways that you can use that flat nine to create more tension and resolution in your lines. Okay. Um, Steve Best says, Happy New Year, everybody. Absolutely. Okay. Questions asked in the chat. Okay, Albert. I'm tried putting into C since the B minor 7 flat 5 would love to resolve to a C. Um, but I would rather put to chords in a different suggest. So Albert, I think without me knowing this tune very well, I'm not entirely sure if I can answer this question. I think I'm not quite following the question just because I'm not perhaps familiar with the tune. Um, So Albert, if you want, you can send an email on the support channel in your membership, and we can try to like see if we can get to the bottom of this. I think I'm not quite understanding the context just because I don't know the tune, but I obviously would love to help you. So feel free to reach out in the support channel. Maybe share with a piece with me, a PDF of the piece or something like that, and I can take a better look at it and maybe you could give me a little bit more of an explanation of what you mean by putting chords in different keys and stuff like that. Because I want to help you, but I'm not sure if I can do it right now on the live chat. So, um, okay. Greg says I'm cutting in and out. Hopefully, I'm not still cutting in and out. Apologize for the internet issues, guys. Um, Looking for the next question here. Okay. Lewis is asking, is legato the preferred articulation for brass and woodwind players of jazz? Um, I think so. Oh, Lewis, I prefer when I hear um, guitar players or saxophone players or any instrument playing a little bit more legato when they're playing jazz. I think longer, more smooth flowing lines is more stylistically correct. That being said, I mean, you could still play more staccato. You could still play shorter in jazz, especially if you're trying to articulate things differently. I mean, there's actually a lot of cases where I can hear brass and woodwind players really wanting to use shorter articulations. But I think legato is great for playing more longer flowing lines. I do hear that sometimes in members' recordings in the inner circle where the lines aren't quite as long and flowing as I would like, and that articulate quite there. And that's where listening to a lot of your favorite brass and woodwinds players, copy them, right? Learning exactly how they play it. We talked about transcription earlier, not transcription, but learning solos and being the reason why I like to be exact is because I like to really get deep inside of how they're phrasing things so that I can feel how they're doing it. And when you can really feel it, then that really starts sinking in a lot better, personally for me. So I think legato is preferred in many cases, but not always. Um, Okay, Steve is asking, relatedly, I don't always get the melody like Misty. Recommendations. Steve, looking for your other question or blues turnarounds. Steve, can you can you may have been asking this question while I was talking about some earlier. Can you put down in the chat what you mean by that? Don't always get the melody like Misty recommendations. I would love to help you with that question. I just need a little bit more context there. I might not understand the context. Eric says when playing with the metronome on 2 and 4 is tricky to count in and find the one. Um, Yes, that's true. That's definitely the challenge, right? So that's why I was talking earlier about really spending time not even touching the instrument, right? And just feeling that one on the silent and then the 2 and the 4 with the click, that well, the 1 and the 3 silent, right? Honestly, if you can feel those strong beats in your body, you're going to get lost a lot less. You're going to be able to phrase a lot better because a lot of like the reason why sometimes we get lost playing jazz standards and a variety of other things is just we're not actually feeling that music. We're not feeling the rhythm in our bodies. Also sometimes too, when we're playing lines and we're not able to switch between different subdivisions like triplets and eighth notes and things like that. It's because we can't actually feel it inside of our body. So this is actually a good challenge for everybody. Anyone who's struggling with playing with the metronome on 2 and 4, make that your challenge for the next month. Is just anytime you're using a metronome, default put it on 2 and 4, and I promise you that you will get better at it. Um, let's see. Did Steve get back to me? Related to the person who didn't always get all the notes. Okay. Okay. So Steve, you're asking you don't always get the melody. Like, what instrument do you play? I wonder. I can't remember what instrument you play. I 100% you definitely want to get all the notes of the melody, for sure. Right now, melodies. The different thing about jazz melodies is that when you listen to the different recordings, everybody's playing them a little bit differently, right? So, what you do is you want to listen to a Frank Sinatra version if it's available. Frank Sinatra is always going to sing the melody very straight. Okay. So check out Frank Sinatra versions of tunes. Frank Sinatra is there an original version of the tune? For example, if it's a Wayne Shorter tune, like if you're trying to learn Fee Fi Fo Fum, obviously the place to learn the melody is from Wayne Shorter's album Speak No Evil, where he plays Fee Fi Fo Fum, right? So always go to the source for the melody or go to sources where they do the melody very straight, like Frank Sinatra is a great example of that. So when you're doing melodies, it's hard to always get it exact when there's all these different versions around. So what I would suggest, Steve, is pick one, do your research, right? Do your research. That's why we provide playlists in the Jazz Standards Club, for example. Go through all these recordings and decide what is the version that you think represents the truest form of the melody based on some of that advice that I just gave you, right? And then definitely learn exactly how they play the melody on that version. Okay. Really get it correct before you go off and interpret the melody for your own way. You try to get to the most original version of that melody, learn it note from a so that you can really play it perfectly along with the recording and then go from there. For me, I think if there's anything that you do, if there's anything that you do as far as making sure that you get all the notes correct, I would say the melody is super, super important. So if you have any question with that, Steve, let me know if there's any other bounce back off of that. But yeah, I would definitely say get the melody, go to sources like Frank Sinatra if there's available versions of that. Go to the original source if it's a jazz original, as I'd like to call it, and then listen to lots of different recordings and decide if there's kind of a consensus on the melody. And to be quite honest, like after you've gone through all the work of learning something by ear or doing your research, it can be okay sometimes to look at a sheet music of the melody just to kind of see how somebody boiled it down, right? You have to remember that though, just because it's on sheet music doesn't mean it's correct either. It's just the way that somebody boiled it down and notated it. For example, if you read Autumn Leaves out of the real book, it sounds like a robot, right? because Autumn Leaves is a living melody. It's meant to be played with expression. So it can be helpful though to have that framework too after you've done some work with trying to learn the melody by ear. Hopefully that helps a little bit, Steve. Okay, let's look for another question in the chat. Albert, another question. I want to find an alternate key for Roman numerals. For example, in C, 7, the 3, 6, 5. These aren't standard chords in C. So what is a better alternative sequence for B minor 7, E7, A minor 7, G minor 7, C7? So I think the problem that I'm having with your question still, Albert, that I'm not quite understanding is if we're talking about, so B minor 7. Okay, I think I understand your question now. I understand your question now, Albert. Hopefully I'll answer it correctly. I think what you're saying is if we're in the key of concert C major, right? The B minor 7 flat 5, technically that's the 7 chord, right? Am I tracking with you, Albert? Hope so. Hope I'm getting it this time. Okay. But the thing is, and Albert, what I would really encourage you to do after this conversation is start going into our jazz standards club and looking at different chords analysis, right? Because you'll start seeing stuff come up all the time. So the way I would analyze this in the key of C personally is this B minor 7 to E7 is not necessarily focused on the key of C. It's focused on going to A minor, right? So A minor is what in the key of C major? A minor is 6. A minor is the 6th chord. So when we a B minor 7 flat 5, E7 resolving to the A minor, that's really just the 2-5 of 6. Okay, so A minor is the 6th chord, and B minor 7 flat 5 and E7 are the 2 and the 5 in the key of A minor. So we call this secondary dominance. When we have the E7, we're not thinking about it necessarily as it pertains to being in the key of C. We're thinking about how it's actually a chord. It's a 5 chord tonicizing that A minor 7, making it sound like to our ears like the A minor is the new tonic, even though it's still the 6th chord in C major, right? So B minor 7 flat 5, E7 to A minor, that's a 2-5-1 in the key of A minor. But we're still remembering that A minor is the 6th chord in C. So I would call that a 2-5 of 6, okay? Now, when you have a G minor 7, C7, I'm wondering, does that resolve? Where does that resolve? So G minor 7 to C7, does it resolve to an F major 7? Let's just pretend for our purposes now, Albert, to answer your question, it resolved to an F major 7. So G minor 7, C7, F major 7. Well, what is F major 7? F major 7 is the 4th chord in C. So now this G minor 7 and this C7, we're not really thinking about it in terms of C major. We're thinking about it's a 2-5 of 4, okay? F major 7 being our 4. So G minor 7 is the 2, C7 is the 5, and F major 7 is the 1, but it's the 4 chord in C major. So even though we have a C7 in the key of C, we're thinking about it in terms of resolving, being the 5 chord resolving to F major, making it sound like it's a new tonic. So if you want to use Roman numerals and relate these chord sequences back to C, you have to be careful to remember that always way to analyze a jazz standard to look at every single chord at face value as it relates to the parent key center, right? You have to understand that sometimes in jazz we're tonicizing other diatonic chords. Sometimes in jazz standards we're going to other key centers entirely, right? Like the song Tune Up, right? 2-5 to D major, 2-5 to D major, 2-5 to F. That's why in Tune Up there actually really isn't a key. There's no key to Tune Up because it's just switching through chord changes. So yeah, Albert, I would recommend start just like looking at some of the chords analysis of different jazz standards we have in the club and see how we analyze them. And I think the more that you go over these chords analysis, the more you'll start understanding some of this stuff. Also, check out Roman numeral chords analysis one. That's a good course in your membership if you are wanting to understand how there's some alternate ways you can look at Roman numerals. Albert, I hope I was able to help you this time. I really hope I was able to help you. I hate not being able to help people. So hopefully that was helpful. Um, David says, Steve, that is the best joke I've heard in a while. Good job, Steve. Okay. No worries, Albert. And you can also go ahead and share more with me in the support, but hopefully that did it. um, Cliff asks, somebody shows you a C major lick and you want to make it a C7 lick, just flat the 7? Yeah, that's exactly right. Let's see if I can come up with an example. Like, let's see. I don't know, something simple. Okay, so you're 7. Let's see. Now let's make it dominant. I mean, that works. I mean, sometimes I find that it's a good exercise to do that. It's an exercise to go, what's okay, right? But sometimes, honestly, when you switch the quality of a chord, you almost might want to switch the direction a bit. I don't know. Like maybe that would be something cooler to do than go and then just translating it directly. I don't know. You could also go, I know that's more interesting to me. And because for me, when you switch the quality of a chord, it brings some kind of new context to it. So that's what you could do. But also on top of that, Cliff, one thing to think about is whenever we talk about playing licks or playing anything over top of an isolated chord, I want to know and what chord's coming after it, because that could really depend. Like if I switch a C major, if I change a C major 7 chord to a C7, now I want to know, what is that C7 doing? Is the C7, if I just had a C major and it was like a 1 chord, well, that's one. Okay, so maybe I would want to play something like that. But if turning into a C7, a dominant 7, what does that make the C? Does that means the C is now resolving to an F major 7? So is it, maybe I want that because I want to resolve the F major 7. So I'm just playing a little devil's advocate with you, Cliff. The basic answer to your question is, yeah, you just flat the 7 because that's the only difference between a major 7th and a dominant 7th. But I do think that context matters as well. So um yeah, Cliff, what if the set good, there you go. You're asking the right questions. What if the 7th is not in the lick? Well, then either it doesn't change, either nothing about lick because it doesn't matter, or you have to reconsider what the context of that lick actually is, because it may no longer make sense to play the same thing that you would play for a C major 7 for a C7, because again, always have to think about what chord came before and what chord comes after. That's the only thing that matters when we're creating music, right? It's not about any individual chord in and of itself. Um, Gene's asking for incorporating diminished and half diminished chords into your improv. Sorry if this is a repeat. It's not a repeat, Gene. Anytime you can ask a question like that anytime. So half diminished. Um, so do you mean how you're saying incorporating? So how do you improvise over those chords? So for example, diminished is a chord that you can definitely incorporate. You can use as substitutions in your lines to um, you can use that as an improvisational tool. A half diminished chord, I wouldn't say is typically a chord that you're incorporating so much as it exists. So, like for example, over this is just a half diminished chord. This is a A minor 7 flat 5. I mean, there's a couple ways you could play, right? You could play a Locrian. A Locrian, that's basically a major scale just starting on the lead tone, right? That's some note choices. I mean, you know, it's neither here nor there. Again, I like to focus on chord tones more than scales. You guys know that. You could also try to play a Locrian sharp 2. It's another great option, right? Locrian sharp 2 is a good option to do over that chord. So I'm not sure that you're asking how you can approach those chords. That's a few just for the half diminished. But again, I would really focus mostly on the chord tones there. As far as incorporating diminished chords, so one thing that you can think about, if you have, let's say C again. Okay. Let's say 5. Okay. So that would be G7, a 1 chord. E to C major, right? Right. What we can do is we could actually substitute that dominant 7th chord, a diminished chord. So what we can do is just go, here's a G note, going a whole step down would be F. And if you play an F diminished, you're basically playing a G7 flat 9, right? So an F diminished is the same as a G7 flat 9. So again, a whole step down from the root of the dominant 7th chord you're playing, you can substitute a diminished chord. Now, also what you can do is you can think another. You can just play a diminished chord a half step up from that, right? I'm sorry, I got that wrong. You can play. Sorry, I'm gonna get my theory correct there for you. Yes, sorry. Half step up from that G7. You can also play a diminished 7th chord because, right, remember, diminished chords, you can move them in minor thirds. So what I would challenge you to do, Gene, is next time you see a dominant 7th chord resolving to a minor 7th chord or a major 7th chord, think about it this way. I think, what's that 5 chord? What's a whole step down from there? Okay, so in this case, an F. Right? And use diminished arpeggios and diminished ideas instead of thinking about the G7 or the dominant 7th chord. Think about the F diminished instead. So that's one way you can use diminished harmony. Again, hopefully that gets to the heart of your question. But that's something that you can try for sure, Gene, in your practicing. Okay, Steve, this is back to your question about getting the melody. I can't always hear if you know the melody right and have to guess or fake it. Yeah, we don't want to guess or fake it on the melody. So, Steve, what I would recommend to you is get a slow downer and slow it down. Slow it down. Don't feel like you have to get it full speed. Just slow it down and make sure that you can hear and play every single note. That's what I would recommend you do. Okay, let's take a few more questions. Richard says, let's say I want to record the solo I composed, but only feel comfortable with 8 bars of it. Should I go ahead and play through and post that, warts and all, or just record the 8 bars? Listen, you don't have to post anything that you feel uncomfortable playing, Richard. Like if you practice the 8 bars and feel good about the 8 bars, you can do that. Or what's stopping you from like waiting until you can play all of it, right? Just keep practicing it until you feel better about it, right? And then posting it. Or yeah, feel free. Like post the first 8 bars and then once you get better at more of it, post the other 8 bars. Like a big thing about this, the Learn Jazz Standards Inner Circle community, guys, is when you're recording yourself and you're putting it in the community, everybody can see your progress and you're holding yourself accountable. So, Richard, yeah, even if it's just doing it in parts, I think that's better than not doing it at all, for example. But, again, you could just wait also until you've gotten it a little bit better, right? If you feel like you want to move on, like if you're like, well, I don't want to keep working on it and getting better, like I want to move on to the next thing, that's okay too, right? But maybe your goal shouldn't be to record to compose an entire solo then. Maybe it should be to record and compose a shorter piece and really get that section down better. So sometimes we have to think about adjusting our goals a little bit, guys, like not putting so much pressure on ourselves and just making it simpler. We would way rather make progress with less than try to do too much and aren't able to really execute very well. So that would be the thing I would say. Wes is asking, are there any upcoming courses for piano for non-pianists? I remember you mentioning this. Yes, we are going to do a basics piano course. It's been a little bit delayed, so I apologize for that. But hopefully, we're going to get it out in the beginning of the year. I do apologize for that. We're actually a little bit behind on our course publishing. We are going to be coming out with basics piano course for non and actual piano players. But we're also coming out with our Rhythm Changes Accelerator course. Again, hopefully all this, January at latest February, we'll be getting these things out for you guys. So thanks for being patient on that. It'll be awesome though. Okay. Sarah's asking from Israel, listening for the first time. Great to have you, Sarah. Appreciate you for being here. Having difficulty transcribing a solo and hearing where the downbeats are. Just try and feel it. Well, okay. So this is Sarah. This is what I would do. What I would do is, can you? Well, let's see. This is what I would do. I would slow it down. I was trying to think of a few different options for you, but what I would do is I would get on Amazing Slowdowner. That's a slowdowner software, or you can use an app, or Transcribe is another one. And I would slow that recording down, right? So if you're having a hard time transcribing it, is it because it's going too fast? That could be an issue. And what you want to do is you just want to like clap every single time you get to the beat one. 1, 2, 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And just go and see how far you can get with doing that at a slow tempo so that you feel comfortable with it. You can eventually move it up so that you're getting to faster tempos, but you want to work on just feeling that downbeat first, right? Sometimes we don't need to touch our instrument, right? We just want to feel it first. So use clapping for that. That can be good. If you're able to learn the first 8 bars or so of that solo, then get a metronome on and have it click on every single beat, right? And play the 8 bars you transcribed, you learned by ear, right? Play it along, then take away a beat, then make it on beats 1 and 3. So you're taking away 2 beats. So it's going to be, 1, 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And then if you want, you can switch it to 2 and 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And then you can do just 1 beat per measure. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. This is good training for you, right? With just a little bit of information that you've learned to start feeling what all this feels like. Okay. But I find oftentimes the problem is that it's going too fast for you, perhaps, and you just need to slow it down. Hopefully some of that helps. I would just encourage you this week, Sarah, or the next time you're able to practice, is try to focus on doing that. If you're really having a hard time with the downbeats, slow it down, practice some clapping exercises on the strong beats to start with so that you're able to feel those a little bit better, and then practice playing it with the metronome on those different beats. Hopefully that helps. Okay, Albert's saying I was on track, so that's good. Glad that was helpful, Albert. Francis is asking, I think I hear jazz players swinging notes differently on swing tunes. Are there different ways to play eighths on a swing tune? How about playing them straight on a swing tune? I don't know if there are different ways. So swing is an interesting thing. And Brett actually talks about this a little bit in Feeling and Using Rhythm 101. He talks about how swing is, you can swing something your scale. Like that's like an exaggerated swing, right? And then there's like more of a smooth swing, which like the spectrum towards straight eighths. So it's very subtle, the difference, right? It also depends on how fast you're playing. If you're playing at a slow tempo, eighth notes are going to feel like they're swinging harder, potentially. If you're playing at a fast tempo, you're going to have no choice but to sound like you're swinging less because you're just not going. There's not going to be a big enough difference between eighth notes, straight eighth notes, and swung eighth notes. Um, you can. Are you asking if you can play straight eighths? You can if you want that sort of effect or that kind of sound. I would say that it wouldn't be something that you would carry throughout your solo because that could feel a little bit jarring or strange, but it's something that you can do. I would more so focus on feeling different kinds of swing and experimenting with that for yourself. Having a lot of swing in your lines, having less swing. Honestly, this stuff it ends up just becoming very natural. Usually when I hear people swinging too much in their lines, it's something that it really takes just a little bit of a movement the other direction, and it can be very subtle and difficult to get to that point because sometimes we think about straight eighth notes and swung eighth notes so conceptually, right? That we miss that when we're playing music. It's more of a feeling that's happening than it is actual math. So yeah, I mean, different players play eighth notes differently. That's a fact, and that's why it can also be fun to, again, we talked about learning solos exactly and not fudging some of the notes. Here. Oh, I feel like I lost. I feel like I lost you guys for a second with my internet. So yeah, swing. It's so subtle. It just depends on the instrumentalist playing it. So if we can get inside of how they're swinging, that can be it's something you can only feel. It's not really something that can be explained so much. I don't know if that answered your question completely, but hopefully it got to the heart of it there for you, Francis. Okay. Okay. Sarah has one more follow-up question, and then we're going to conclude our live chat today, our live mastermind, and I'll reveal the next monthly jazz standard study. So Sarah asks, so I should count simultaneously, just try to hear it and not count. So what I'm saying, Sarah, is you definitely want to hear it and not count. But if you're having a hard time hearing it at first, then you should start by counting. Does that make sense? So if from what you described to me in your question, the issue to me seemed to be that you just weren't able to feel the downbeats at all. So, yes, you want to hear it and you don't want to count, but sometimes we have to go backwards and do that extra work to start feeling it. And then once you feel it, right? Once you get the hang of the way that downbeat feels, the way the downbeat sits on the particular bars of music you're learning, then go ahead, take the training wheels off and go forward. But that's what I would do if I just wasn't feeling it. You know what I mean? So hopefully that helps. If you want to do always, it's just something to do for now since we're trying to diagnose your issue with not being able to feel it right away. Okay, I hope that helps, Sarah. Francis, I'm glad I answered your question. Okay, guys, this has been a really lovely monthly jazz mastermind. So thank you guys so much all for being here. As always, if you had a question that didn't get asked, support channel is always there. Also, we always do one of these every month. If you need clarification on any of the answers I gave, I'll use the support channel. Appreciate having all you guys. Hey, I wish you guys all a very happy new year. Before I do that, of course, let's announce what the next jazz standard study is, our very first one of 2022. And the jazz standard is My Shining Hour. My Shining Hour. Oh, internet cut out again. I would say My Shining Hour, similarly to Yardbird Suite, is one of those tunes I pretty much always call on every single gig or jam session. I just love My Shining Hour. It's a really great tune to learn and to play over. It's a really joyous tune too. So I think it's a really fun one to start off our 2022 with. So for those of you who are in the Jazz Standards Club working through those, My Shining Hour is going to be an absolutely fun one to do. So I look forward to seeing all you guys do with that jazz tune. All right, guys, I wishing you a happy new year. I want to thank all of you who have been members of the inner circle this year. I appreciate every single one of you. This has been a fantastic year in the inner circle. Absolutely fun. For all of you new members who have come recently, you guys are in for a treat for 2022. And I would just encourage all of you to start thinking about making plans for practicing. But remember, make plans for practicing with the amount of time that you actually have to practice, right? Don't make unrealistic. Look at your current schedule and make a commitment that I have 30 minutes to practice. I'm going to practice and work on my inner circle studies. And as many of the members who have been here for a long time, I'm talking more to the new members here, they'll tell you that that long-term small progress built over time makes a huge, huge difference. And we're here to support you in the inner circle this year. This is going to be the best year for your jazz playing yet, best year of the inner circle yet. So I appreciate all of you guys. So happy New Year's. Cheers to all of you. And we'll see you guys in this inner circle, guys. Cheers.